Frasier has returned in 2023 after a nearly 20-year hiatus. Now, I say return, but this revival is in many ways a spin-off of the original show, much like the original was a spin-off of the series Cheers. It's not very often that you see a character being played for 40 years. That's longer than Dan Castellaneta has voiced Homer Simpson. It's longer than Sam Waterston has appeared in Law & Order, but not as long as Carol Spinney was Big Bird. I think he holds the record because I think he started in when the show began, and then it ran all the way into 2018.
I can only think of action stars like maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator or Sylvester Stallone as Rocky that have played a character as long as 40 years.
That's true, but not how long Frasier went on.
Yes.
There has been that 20-year gap, but he went from 1984 all the way to 2004, and then now starting in 2023.
He was introduced in season 3 of Cheers, and then 11 seasons with Frasier.
So I headed into this reboot like I head into every reboot recently. George Lopez, iCarly, Punky Brewster, How I Met Your Goldfish. It doesn't matter. They're usually bad. Sitcoms with laugh tracks are cringy, sappy, corny mess. We all know that. The main character is too old. There's not enough original cast returning. The new people feel like crappy replacements. The magic's just gone. But I'm not going to lie. I've seen the headlines too. I know that the critics are saying that this is bad. I know that the audience has also come out saying that they didn't like the idea of it coming back, because I don't know what Kelsey Grammer did to kill his fan base. Usually when they say there's a returning, like if they said Seinfeld was coming back, there'd be waves of people who are way into.
Yeah.
I don't think they could.
Jerry Seinfeld has said that he's been hinting at it that it could at some point come back.
Okay, well, I'm saying that Kelsey Grammer, when that trailer got released on YouTube, the dislike bar was huge.
That's true.
And so people were not looking forward to this. Niles is gone. The father's gone. The dog is gone. I get it, but I have to say, I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed these first 2 episodes.
I mean, you're not the only one. It has an 86% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
So there are other people who like it besides me. I thought I was going to have to come in here and just battle off all the haters, because I understand why they're hating it. Yes, Niles' son is obnoxiously nerdy. The main character is still snooty. There's a laugh track. There's the absence of David Hyde Pierce. But at the same time, people got to get over that stuff. The show adapted, much like when it changed from being about Cheers in the bar and being just about Frasier. This feels like now that he's going back to Boston and now he's starting a new life with his son, that it's a whole different entity. And even though it's got the same title, it really should be treated like a separate show. And Kelsey Grammer, I don't know much about the person, but he delivers. The guy has not lost his comic timing, and not a lot of people can say that.
He was ecstatic to learn that they were thinking about bringing the show back. He was right on board with it the whole time. And I mean, they were obviously trying to hype it up a little bit because there was a documentary that was kind of released online about the making of this show. But it seemed like the cast, they always said that when Kelsey Grammer was when he was on point, it was so easy to do a scene with him.
What sort of documentary got released for the making of the show?
It was a 30-minute documentary where they just did interviews with the cast, Kelsey Grammer. They were even able to get James Burrows, who directed the original series and co-created Cheers.
But did they talk at all about the sets that they're about to walk into?
It's the same set that they did beforehand.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the same set. It's still
they just converted it?
Paramount Studios. Yeah.
Oh,
where they shot the original Frasier.
But I'm not saying this. The set itself is different. So the cool thing they did with the intros in the first episode, they do the same one that they used to do for the original Frasier, where they show you Seattle. But then they show him flying away from it, kind of like Will Smith when he goes from Fresh Prince from Philly all the way to LA.
That was
right?
Kelsey Grammer's idea, to bring him back to Boston.
And so by the second episode, the stencil thing that they do with the pen, it becomes Boston, Beantown, and there's constant references to Cheers because they've got a bar there. Well, and so one of the main settings is a bar, just like How I Met Your Mother. So you've got that one. And then you have the apartment complex where halfway through the episode, Kelsey Grammer decides that he wants to rebond with his son, and he shows up there, and then he ends up buying the entire building. That's how rich he is.
Wait, what? This is like Batman when in Batman Begins he buys a hotel.
Well, Kelsey Grammer's character Frasier he's famous.
Yes,
he's famous because of his talk show, which I guess transferred over to a television program at some point, maybe in the middle of I don't know if that was part of the hiatus. I didn't see the full series when it ran, but I know that it went from a radio show, I think, to a television show. He's accrued enough money that his son has kind of left and become a firefighter to Frasier's dismay. And so he decides, in order to reacclimate himself, he gets a job at Harvard, and then he buys the building that his son is staying in and barely able to make rent for, says he can stay there for free along with this girl that he was living with at the time named Eve, who we get some backstory on her in the first episode. But the actual setting looks so much like something you would have seen before. The Eve's apartment looks like the How I Met Your Mother set from the inside.
Okay, so you're saying things you've seen before in different TV shows.
But it also looks exactly like the Friends, Chandler and Joey's apartment for the first few seasons. And if you think about it, the How I Met Your Mother set and the Friends set are pretty similar.
Yes.
And then on the other side of the hallway, it looks exactly like the Big Bang Theory main court. And then it also looks like the Friends setup again with Monica and what's her face? Rachel.
So I know that, were you getting nostalgic when you were seeing sets like that?
Well, I couldn't avoid it. And also it just reminded me that Frasier is kind of what Sheldon would become. So Sheldon was like a really, really extreme version of Frasier. Frasier is snooty. He is pretentious. He is very, again, uppity. He doesn't even pay attention to sports because he's above that.
But I can't
he looks
see
down
Sheldon
on
as
people.
being sarcastic. It seems like
Sheldon's 100% sarcastic. He also doesn't have a good relationship or didn't have a great relationship with his dad because his dad was sort of more of a redneck. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of Frasier's joke here, is that his son is kind of like his father, like Frasier's father.
His son's name is Freddie Crane, right?
Yeah, and they brought him in, I'm sure that he wasn't the original.
Yeah, right? This is not a Happy Valley situation. Trevor Einhorn played the role prior, but now it's Jake Cutmore Scott, and
they had to fill in the gaps. So Kelsey Grammer's show, however, they bring in all these supporting cast members, and none of them fit as well as the Niles character, but they're not supposed to. You've got Alan Cornwall, who's the British, also pretentious professor.
First thing he's worked on since 2019, the actor, but yeah.
Yeah, because his son passed away, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the first episode, it said in real life that there was it was a memorial, in loving memory of two people, one of which was the son, and then it went and it showed the father as well.
Yes, right, in 2018.
There was also a writer, a lady who I forget her name, but she was also credited there. His son's thing was tragic, though. Alan, what's his real name again?
Nicholas Lyndhurst.
Yes, that's the name of the son, or is that the name of the?
That's the name of the actor.
Okay, yeah. So I think he died of a brain hemorrhage in his sleep. It was really sad to hear that. But then also Niles' son is in this show. Yes, and he's probably the hardest character to sympathize with, the hardest character to watch because he's just so cringy. He's got eidetic memory. He's kind of a constant klutz and a nerd. By the end of the second episode, there's this touching moment where Frasier and his son bond, and Frasier and the thing about him Freddie moving into his dad's apartment, mm-hmm. is that he isn't allowed to put any of his stuff anywhere. But by the end of the episode, because he's such a big Boston Red Sox fan, he has this mold or glass thing of Wrigley Field. No, not Wrigley. That's
Chicago. Yeah.
Fenway Park, where he has the dirt from 2013, where David Ortiz and the rest of them played, and it meant a lot to him. And Kelsey Grammer's character Frasier puts that on the piano. It's still in the box. I still think that's a terrible idea. Never put any form of dirt onto a piano. But then Niles' son's character David comes in at the very end, takes the dirt, thinks it's just regular dirt, dumps it into the planter, and then that's the end of the episode. So there's funny moments.
David Crane, actually, that character was introduced in the series finale of the original Frasier, and like you said, he's the parents' characters of Niles and Daphne. Mm-hmm. But overall, it seems like you liked it. What would you rate the series?
The series so far, I'm going to say that I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I was thinking of just passing it over average at a 6 out of 10, but I think people ought to know that this is not as bad as it originally seemed like it was going to be. It's not just a father getting to know his son worn out trope. The sets do look like they're offsets of other sets. The realism is not a question. Again, he buys that apartment within a day. How is that even legally possible?
How do you see how much money he buys it for?
No, of course not. They just have him show up and be like, I found a new place. And then at first you think he just bought the apartment next door or is renting from it. And he's like, no, I bought the building. It doesn't make any sense. But he also gets an offered job at Harvard the day he arrives just to do a guest lecture, as if Harvard is a Domino's pizza chain. And it just has a big hiring sign. No, I mean, it reminded me of Ted Mosby in the later seasons of How I Met Your Mother
when he
gets a job at Columbia. It wasn't just he gets a job at Columbia with I think he only had like a master's degree, and it just seems like for such an elite university, both of these places would have a little bit more. There'd be more steps involved before you could just get the job. But it's the realism of a sitcom.
Right. I mean, to be fair, the Harvard kind of Frasier becoming a professor was one of the last minute ideas that they threw in. It really wasn't supposed to be a big part of the show. So why do you think then? Do you think it's just because of the things you mentioned before about how they aren't able to get the cast back, that people were not really looking forward to this?
Yeah, I have to say, like, having not watched every single episode, not being a huge Frasier fan walking into it, that there's like part of that fan base that probably just misses. But they have 260 some episodes that they can always go back to. And if I was told that like my favorite show is coming back, but they're getting rid of the cast except for the main character and they're moving him to a new location, then I would just I would still give it a chance, especially for something as corny as what you'd expect. They even, because the father died in real life,
Jack Mahoney, I think.
It feels like Frasier is now that dad here, even though his character is the same and his mannerisms and all that stuff is the same. He even sings the same song at the very end. So I'm not saying, when I say this is a spinoff, I'm not saying that it's complete, like it's as distant as Frasier was to Cheers. But I am saying you have to unlink the two. You have to consider them separate objects.
He doesn't only just sing the song at the end, he sings the intro song. Like, you're able to tell that, right? He went to the producers. He was such a big fan of what the composer came up with, and he went to the producers and was like, I'm going to be the one to sing this.
There's not really an intro song. It just says Frasier, you know? But it is the green, or the eggs and ham and the, the scrambled eggs and tossed salad, which I think at one point they came out saying meant that, like, it's all mixed up. And so, like, with Frasier, despite him always trying to have his shit together and be smart about everything always gets tossed around, you know? And so the storylines that I should point out, though, is that Eve, as the next door neighbor, her husband died. Her husband was Freddie's partner at the fire department because he's a firefighter. And so they ended up moving in together just as friends in order to make rent because it's an expensive city in Boston. And so that part made sense to me.
She's supposed to be really optimistic. Like,
she is sort of like Penny from The Big Bang Theory. Like, despite being a widow, she doesn't seem all that depressed about it. I'm sure they might go into that later on. She didn't have much to do in the second episode besides bring her baby over to Frasier every time that she could when he was crying because John, the baby's name, would suddenly shut up, and he just liked the sound of Frasier's voice, which I think a lot of people do because the guy was a radio host in the show.
Obviously, yeah.
And it is funny how he's like adapted his career each one, because when he was at the bar, he was just a guy who would be a therapist. And then suddenly, by the time he got to Frasier, he got his own show and he became famous. And now he's going to be a professor at Harvard. So despite the fact that it's gone on for 40 years, the character's still adapting.
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing that I found funny was Kelsey Grammer's acting technique. Have you heard about what he did on set of the original Frasier? He called it requisite disrespect. He would not...
I hope that doesn't mean he was insulting to the other actors, and that's why David Hyde Pierce didn't come back.
No, well, there's a different reason for that. But what he would do is he wouldn't learn his lines until the very last minute, right before they started filming, and he would never rehearse with the cast. So, like, right as it started filming in front of a live studio audience, much like this one is, he would just go off.
That's a live studio audience? I thought it was just a laugh track.
No, live studio audience for this one, as well as the original.
They get to redo it. It's not like they just put out the... What was that one show where they just kept on putting out the actual first version? Undeclared. No, not undeclared. It was like something or other. It had Chris D'Elia or whatever in it. They would sing the intro from the crowd.
Yeah.
All right, you don't remember it. It's fine. But yeah, so those are the storylines. You've got the son and the father reuniting. The son at one point buys an air hockey table for his father's apartment because he wants to just put his stamp on it and kind of prove a point that, like, you got to let me sink in here. But then you find out that he has actually been lying to all his firefighter colleagues this whole time, telling them that his father was dead. Because not only was Frasier a little embarrassed of his son choosing to leave Harvard and go become a firefighter, but also the son was always in the dad's shadow. And so he would tell all his firefighter friends that his dad died when he was a very young child. So when Frasier shows up and they all recognize him for being sort of a public figure, and then they have him talk to Freddie as if they don't know each other to try to discuss his like inherent problems with his father, it becomes very clear to those firefighters that that he has been lying, but they're not smart enough to realize that they had known each other beforehand.
Yeah.
And so then Frasier has to pull, again, the realism here is ridiculous, but like has to pull a wild card Mamma Mia plot point where he says that at the very end of his mom's life, she had like 3 different people that she couldn't be sure who the father was. And they were just now realizing that Frasier was his father.
So, okay.
Yes.
So, but at the heart of this show, it's just supposed to be wholesome, right?
Yeah,
like I think
it's got heart.
You would probably agree most with what Variety said. They said it was more charming than expected. What happened was, like I felt bad when I did research for this because whenever a revival show happens, like the ones you mentioned, iCarly, Punky Brewster, I also had that '90s show in there.
I've seen The Crew. I mean, there's just so many bad sitcoms. Even Reboot. It reminded me a little bit of the Hulu show Reboot because this is technically that.
Yes.
But like I haven't seen it done well. And I feel like this is it.
Yeah,
like
it doesn't have a bad IMDb score either. It's separate from the original Frasier score.
Because I think the original Frasier is like really high.
Yeah, it has a 7.3 on IMDb for this one. But I was going to say for all the reboots, it always seems like the cast is really excited to come back. And like I said, Kelsey Grammer, it took like no persuasion. He was on board 100%. But the exact opposite happened here. So I'll give you a little bit of a timeline. In 2016, rumors started spreading that Frasier was going to come back. Kelsey Grammer originally denied it. And then in 2018, he confirmed it, and then even confirmed it more, or 2018 confirmed it, then confirmed it more in 2019.
Wow.
And then they were able to get the casting director, Jeff Greenberg, like I said, the person who directed or show ran the original, James Burrows, Kelsey Grammer, same set, like I said, Paramount Studios.
There are some shows that happen in a vacuum that we've done where they've like greenlit it, and then within 6 months the show's out.
Well,
not this one.
but that was originally the plan. They also had an idea. Frasier and Niles would run a black box theater just like the restaurant, so they contacted David Hyde Pierce, who played Niles in the original, thinking he would say yes, and he declined. He felt that the script was funny, but that kind of the character he played had run his course.
This is one of those things where I wouldn't be surprised if he came back for an appearance in a later episode, maybe the finale if it doesn't get picked up for another season. However, I don't know why it wouldn't. I don't think that if this show does well enough that he would have a good reason not to at least visit the character once more. The guy has a sense of humor. He was in Wet Hot American Summer. He knows how to make fun of himself. I don't think this is ego-driven as much as he seriously didn't want to be another show.
But I think
back.
they also reached out to other cast members who just said no, and this caused all the showrunners to scrap the original plan. It was supposed to come out in 2020. They were thinking writing, shooting, editing, and then sometime in 2020. Instead, no. 2021 is when they decided to greenlight the series, and then 2023 is when it ended up coming out.
This would have been worse had they stayed in Seattle, had they tried to write around the fact that there's just a gaping hole without Niles there. Mm-hmm. Like they wrote out the father. They even had them mention the funeral several times in the first episode. Like that's one of the things that Freddie didn't actually attend, but Frasier was disappointed with that. But like the fact that they move it over to Boston and they make it such a big, like it just feels organically that there wouldn't be any leftover characters from before. He makes mention of his ex-wife in an insulting way, but like overall, I think it was a really smart move to let him drive the show in a different direction.
And yeah, I mean, every single review, even if they haven't enjoyed it, has a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes, gives praise to Kelsey Grammer's performance.
I wasn't expecting to laugh at some of the jokes, and I did. So.
The strange thing is that the major publications, even kind of as you were alluding to earlier, even like the titles aren't that kind to it. The New York Times titled their review, "Frasier returns tossed, scrambled, and excruciating." The Hollywood Reporter said Kelsey Grammer gets stranded in Paramount's pointless revival. And then Rolling Stone said it was unfunny and uninspired.
I think they had their claws out and their fangs out before they even got a chance to see it. And they were looking for bad things. And so was I. Honestly, like when I tuned in, I was like, let's start writing down the bad stuff. And Niall's son pops in on board, and I'm like, oop, this is the first of a billion things gone wrong. And then Kelsey Grammer starts his thing. He's doing the heavy work, but he's not the character that's holding heavy things, because we see Freddie and David both struggle to hold things in the first few episodes. So there is some physical humor there, but it's never going to involve Kelsey Grammer. The most physical he gets is when he looks at a bottle of scotch, and he gets dismayed because of how bad a brand it is.
Okay, we can end this off on actually a game because, like you have said at the beginning, there are so many reboots coming out, and I want to see if you can guess the one that is fake out of these 4.
Yeah.
The first one is The Flintstones, second, Ally McBeal, third, Cheers, 4, Fawlty Towers. Which one is fake?
Okay, so let's go one by one. So you said the first one is the Flintstones, and you're saying like a cartoon version of it is coming back out?
Yes.
That seems believable. The next one is
Ally
McBeal. I don't think that she would return for anything, but Robert Downey Jr. was in that series. I remember. Next one?
Cheers.
Cheers and Frasier? That feels
James Burrow is...
But Ted Danson loves to do things. And the next one?
Fawlty Towers.
Fawlty Towers. I think I've heard the Fawlty Towers. We've talked about the Fawlty Towers one before. So I think it's down to Cheers and Ally McBeal, and I think it's Cheers. I don't think Cheers is coming
You are
back.
correct. Cheers is definitely not coming back. James Burrow squashed any hope of that happening when he was doing publicity
But
for
Ally
this.
McBeal.
But Ally McBeal, yeah, in August
Navy
2022,
SEAL.
it was announced to be in development. Flintstones, Fox ordered a sequel series entitled Bedrock, and then, John Cleese is going to star and write in the new Fawlty Towers that's coming out at some point.
Yeah, we've talked about that one. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.